I haven't slept in 3 days. Not really. Not since I left that godforsaken cabin. Every time I close my eyes, I feel it's something standing over me. Its breath cold against my skin, even though I know I am alone in my room. Or at least I hope I am alone. I try to convince myself that it's just my imagination. Just the aftershocks of the terror I felt back there. But then there are the whispers, soft and indistinct, like voices, just out of earshot. They echo from the corners of the room, but every time I turn on the light, there's nothing there. At first, I thought I'd left it all behind when I drove away from that cursed place. I thought the distance would protect me, but it followed me. And now, I don't think I'll ever escape it. It all started with a stupid decision. Renting an isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere. I just needed a break, a chance to clear my head after everything that had happened. Instead, I found something I never should have disturbed. And now, whatever it is, it won't let me go. It was a last-minute rental, a small cabin buried deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. The photos online made it seem cozy, charming even. A place to unwind, to escape from everything. But as I drove down the dirt road that wound deeper and deeper into the forest, unease began to creep in. The trees grew taller and denser, their twisted branches blotting out the sky. By the time I arrived, the sun was little more than a faint glow behind a canopy of leaves, and the shadows had already begun to stretch. The cabin was smaller than I'd imagined, huddled on the edge of a clearing like it had been abandoned and forgotten. The wood was dark, weathered by time and rain, and the windows stared out like blind eyes. The air smelled of moss and damp earth, heavy with the scent of decay. There was no sound, no birds, no rustling leaves, not even the hum of insects. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I unlocked the door, and the cabin greeted me with the scent of old wood and mildew. The floorboards creaked under my boots as I stepped inside, each groan echoing like a warning. The furniture was sparse and dated. A sagging couch, a rickety table, and a single bed with a threadbare quilt. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling at the edges, revealing dark stains beneath. There was a fireplace, its hearth blackened with soot, and above it hung a crooked mirror. The glass was clouded, the reflection distorted, as if it belonged to another time. My stomach twisted as I caught my reflection, a shadow of myself staring back. It wasn't just the look of the place, it was the feeling. A weight in the air, like the cabin was alive and watching. It clung to me, seeping into my skin. I told myself it was just my imagination. An old house in the woods was bound to feel eerie. But even as I unpacked my things and tried to settle in, I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. The first night, the quiet was suffocating. The only sound was the crackling of the fire I'd started. But even that felt hollow, swallowed by the emptiness of the place. As I lay in bed, the cabin seemed to breathe around me. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows, and the floorboards creaked, as if someone or something was moving in the dark. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the forest, of figures standing among the trees, their faces hidden in shadow. They were watching, waiting, just like the cabin itself. I woke up gasping, the room icy cold, even though the fire was still burning. It was only my first night, and already I wanted to leave. The second night in the cabin was worse. By then, the oppressive silence and eerie stillness had started to weigh on me. I told myself that I was imagining things, that the feeling of being watched was just nerves. But no matter how much I tried to shake it, the unease wouldn't go away. It started with the little things I could explain if I tried hard enough. A mug I left on the counter had moved to the sink. The door to the bedroom creaked open on its own, though I was sure I'd closed it before heading outside to explore the forest. And then there was the sound. I shut the curtains and locked the door, though deep down, I wasn't sure a lock would make any difference. I climbed into bed, pulling the quilt up to my chin like a child hiding from a nightmare. The humming faded after a while, but the silence that followed was almost worse. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to close my eyes. But just as I started to drift off, there was a new sound. It came from the far side of the cabin, a faint scraping, like nails dragging across wood. It was slow, methodical, moving closer with each pass. My heart thundered in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to get up, to run. But I couldn't move. When the sound reached the bedroom door, it stopped. The handle rattled once, then fell still. I waited, barely breathing, every muscle in my body locked in terror. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the creak of the floorboards retreating, fading into the cabin's blackened halls. I stayed awake until dawn, clutching a flashlight in one hand and a heavy book in the other, as if either could protect me. But even the pale light of morning didn't bring relief. I knew I wasn't alone in that cabin. By the third day, I was running on fumes. Sleep had become impossible. Every sound, every shadow felt like a threat. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, that the isolation was playing tricks on me. But that illusion shattered when I found the journal. It was mid-afternoon, the sun hanging low over the clearing, casting long shadows into the cabin. I had planned to pass the time by cleaning anything to keep my mind occupied. That's when I noticed the loose floorboard under the bed. At first, I thought nothing of it, but curiosity got the better of me. I pried it up, expecting to find nothing more than dust and cobwebs. Instead, I pulled out an old, battered leather journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. As I flipped through, I realized it belonged to someone who had stayed in the cabin long before me. The entries were short and fragmented, written in a shaky hand that seemed to grow more erratic with each passing page. The first entries were innocuous enough descriptions of the cabin, the beauty of the forest, the peace they had hoped to find. But then the tone shifted. They wrote of strange noises at night, of feeling watched, and of waking up to find deep scratches on the walls. One entry in particular sent a chill down my spine. It won't let me leave. Every time I try, the woods lead me back here. I see it in the corner of my eye, but when I turn, it's gone. It's in the cabin with me. I think it always has been. The last page was covered in frantic scribbles, the words barely readable. All I could make out was one phrase repeated over and over. "Don't stay after dark." I dropped the journal, my hands trembling. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of joke, a story left behind to scare whoever stumbled upon it. But deep down, I knew better. It explained too much: the noises, the humming, the feeling of being trapped. That night, I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair. I kept every light in the cabin on, the journal sitting open on the table like some kind of warning. I tried to stay awake, to keep my mind sharp, but exhaustion finally caught up with me. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I knew immediately something was wrong. The room was pitch black. The lights, the ones I had left blazing before I fell asleep, were off. I reached for the flashlight on the bedside table, but before my hand found it, I heard it. A voice, soft and low, coming from the other side of the bedroom door. It was humming the same melody I had heard outside the cabin. My heart pounded as I sat frozen in the dark, listening to the floorboards groan under the weight of whatever was standing out there. Then, the handle of the door began to turn. The bedroom door didn't open that night, but it didn't have to. I stayed frozen in bed until the first light of dawn peeked through the cracks in the curtains. When I finally found the courage to move, my body was stiff and my mind foggy from the terror of the night. The cabin seemed different in the daylight, less oppressive, less alive, but I knew better now. I had to leave. Throwing my things into a duffel bag, I decided I wouldn't spend another night here. As I zipped the bag, I glanced toward the table where the journal lay. It had been open to the final page when I'd gone to bed, but now it was shut tight, the leather strap neatly wrapped around it. My stomach churned. I hadn't touched it. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, But the moment I stepped outside, I felt it. The air was heavier than it had been the past few days. The smell of damp earth, sharper and sour, like rot. The trees pressed closer, their twisted branches seeming to reach out toward me. Still, I pushed forward, trying to ignore the way the forest seemed to tighten around the clearing. The trail that had led me to the cabin was gone. I walked where I knew the path had been, or where it had to be. But all I found were endless trees. My breaths came faster, the panic rising with every step. I tried to retrace my route, thinking I'd somehow veered off course. But no matter which way I turned, I always ended up back at the clearing. The cabin loomed before me, dark and silent, as if waiting. I refused to go back inside, choosing instead to sit in the clearing, with my back to the building. As the hours stretched on, the sunlight dimmed, the shadows growing longer until the forest was swallowed by darkness. I don't know what I expected to happen. Maybe that someone would find me, or that morning would come and everything would be normal again. But instead, the noises began. At first, it was the knocking again. The same deliberate pattern. 3 knocks, silence, then 3 more. This time, it wasn't just coming from the walls. It was coming from the trees, the ground beneath me, and the cabin itself, surrounding me, mocking me. Then came the humming, louder than before, closer. It drifted through the trees like a cold wind, wrapping around me and raising the hairs on my arms. My flashlight flickered, the weak beam struggling against the oppressive dark. That's when I saw it. Just beyond the edge of the clearing, a figure stood among the trees. It was tall and impossibly thin, its body a silhouette of shadow against the faint moonlight. I couldn't make out its face, or maybe it didn't have one, but its head tilted, as if it were studying me. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, humming that same tune, low and unsteady, like it was unraveling a song that had no end. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran into the woods, the branches tearing at my arms and face as I stumbled blindly through the dark. But no matter how far I ran, no matter how fast, the figure was always there, just out of reach, its humming growing louder with every step. I don't remember how I got back to the cabin, but when I did, the door was wide open, the inside shrouded in shadows. It was waiting for me. I stood in the clearing, staring at the open door of the cabin, my breaths ragged and shallow. The figure was gone, or maybe it was inside, waiting for me. I didn't want to go back in. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to keep moving, but I knew there was nowhere to go. No way out of the forest. The humming started again, low and rhythmic, vibrating through the trees and the ground beneath me. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, its weak beam quivering in the growing dark. The cabin seemed to shift in the moonlight, its weathered boards twisting and groaning like the thing inside it was trying to push through the walls. I took a step forward, then another. The air grew colder with each step, a damp chill that clung to my skin and soaked through my clothes. The doorway loomed before me, a black void that seemed to swallow the faint glow of my flashlight. I paused at the threshold, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. That's when I heard a voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering my name from inside the cabin. My stomach turned as I realized it wasn't just whispering, it was laughing. I forced myself inside, my legs trembling with each step. The air was suffocating, thick with the smell of damp wood and something acrid, like burning hair. The flashlight flickered, casting wild shadows across the walls, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye. Then the door slammed shut behind me. The noise was deafening, echoing through the small space like a gunshot. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, or so it seemed. The laughter grew louder, coming from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. I felt it before I saw it, a presence behind me, cold and heavy, pressing against my back. I turned slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. At first, there was nothing, just the empty room and the peeling wallpaper. But as the beam swept across the far corner, the shadows seemed to thicken, coalescing into a shape. It was the figure from the forest, impossibly tall and thin, its limbs contorted like broken branches. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a swirling void, an endless blackness that seemed to pull the air from the room. The humming stopped, replaced by a low, guttural sound that reverberated through my chest. I backed away, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me, or maybe consuming me. My flashlight flickered again, the beam fading until it was barely aglow. In a blind panic, I grabbed the journal from the table and hurled it at the figure. It passed through the shadow like smoke, landing on the floor with a dull thud. But something changed. The figure twitched, its form flickering like a flame caught in the wind. Desperate, I ran to the fireplace, my mind racing. I grabbed the matches from the mantel and struck one, the small flame trembling in my hand. The figure surged toward me, its guttural noise rising into a deafening roar. I grabbed the journal and threw it into the fireplace, shoving kindling and logs on top of it. The cabin erupted in chaos. The walls trembled, the windows shattered, and the figure writhed, its form splintering like shards of glass. The fire roared to life, the flames consuming the journal and spreading to the walls. I stumbled back, choking on smoke as the heat scorched my skin. The figure screamed a sound that wasn't human, that wasn't meant to be heard. It twisted and shrank, its form dissolving into the flames until there was nothing left but ash. I ran, bursting out of the cabin and into the clearing. The fire raged behind me, the light casting monstrous shadows against the trees. I didn't stop running until I was deep in the forest, the heat of the flames fading into the cool night air. I don't know how I found the road. I don't even remember running. All I know is that when I looked back, the cabin was gone, swallowed by the forest and the darkness. It's been weeks since I escaped the cabin. The burns on my hands have started to heal, and the scratches on my arms are fading. But the scars inside me are deeper. I keep telling myself it's over, that the fire destroyed whatever was in that place. But I know that's a lie. The first night home, I finally felt safe, or at least I tried to. I locked every door and window, drew the curtains, and turned on every light in the house. But no amount of light could banish the shadows I felt creeping just beyond the edges of my vision. I stayed awake until dawn, jumping at every sound, every flicker. When I finally collapsed into bed, I thought I'd finally left it all behind. I was wrong. It started small, like before. The creak of floorboards in an empty room. The faint sound of humming so soft I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. I told myself it was my imagination, that the cabin had gotten into my head, but then I saw the scratches. 3 long, jagged lines on the inside of my bedroom door. I tried to ignore them, but they multiplied. Every morning new marks appeared on the walls, the furniture, even the floor. I painted over them, scrubbed them away, but they always came back. And then the whispers started. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible, like the rustling of leaves outside a window. But they grew louder with each passing night, until they were all I could hear. Sometimes they were voices, murmuring just beyond the threshold of understanding. Other times, it was laughter low, cruel, and unmistakably human. Last night, I woke up to find the mirror in my bathroom shattered. The shards lay scattered across the sink, reflecting fractured pieces of me. But that wasn't the worst part. Written on the mirror, in long jagged letters, was a single word. Stay. I don't know what it wants. Maybe it's angry I burned the cabin. Maybe it wants me to go back. Or maybe it's something worse. Something I can't understand. I haven't left the house in days. The lights are always on, though they don't seem to help. Every corner, every shadow feels alive. like it's watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I hear the humming at night, closer than ever, just beyond the walls. Sometimes, I think I see it, the tall, thin figure from the woods, standing in the corners of my vision. But when I turn, there's nothing there. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I am afraid to sleep, afraid to dream, afraid to let the lights go out. It followed me. Whatever was in that cabin is here now, and I don't think it will ever let me go. I am writing this as a warning. If you ever find a cabin deep in the woods, if you ever hear a humming voice in the dark, don't stay. Don't do what I did. Run, and don't look back. Because once it finds you, it never lets you go.